imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's a real one. I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed, indeed, indeed. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time for the one, the only Protonic reversal. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Hey, here we are. This is one of the first post-election Protonics, I think. Did we get into it with Greg Picciotto? I don't remember. Well, it's a very different world right now. That's all I'm going to say. I'm very excited today to talk to Mr. Tobias Nathaniel. He's a hell of an artist. He is kind of most known for an incredible band you may have heard of called the Blackheart Procession. He's played on, I feel like, one of the most interesting blonde redhead records. He's played with David J. Kind of San Diego rock royalty. Except, and this is here's the hook, everybody. His new band, the Red Step, which is awesome, in which he has a new record that either is coming out or has just come out, depending on when you're listening to this. He's in Belgrade, so he lives in Serbia. So he's a San Diego dude, and he lives in Serbia, which is wild. And I'm sure we'll get into that. I'm looking forward to talking to him and getting to the bottom of all that. Yeah, the Red Step. Very excited. A little bit of housekeeping. Thanks, everybody, for sharing the episodes around, all the great feedback and everything. As always, protonicreversal.com for the archives to hear any of the shows. And if you want to hear them sooner, you see, if you're like, hey, there's an episode that I want to hear, and it's not on my thing yet where it does the thing and it shows up. Well, it's probably not released on the free feed yet. Patreon.com/ProtonicReversal. $1 a month will get you early access to everything. Warts and all. Because there's no ads, no sponsors, no kidding. Cool. So anyway, Tobias Nathaniel. This is going to be rad. The Red Step's great. We'll play some Red Step songs after I have them on. But let's get right down to it, huh? Tobias, welcome to the show, man. It's so great to have you on. This is I know this is one of the many time zone discrepancy things that we have on this show sometimes, where we have different time zones, and there's a lot to get together. So it's very exciting to have you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited, and of course, thank you for making the arranging this due to time zone issues. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, so I was just listening to the new Red Step record, and it's good stuff. This has got an incredible story behind it, and I wonder if you're already sick about telling the story of relocating and then putting the band together and so on and so on. But it is much more interesting than we just got 3 guys in a room, we started playing, and that old John. So
right.
I wonder if you could tell me about going to Belgrade and how did the Red Step come to pass?
Sure. First of all, I should mention that if I accidentally bust out into Serbian, it just means that I'm comfortable, because I'll just lose track. I'll try not to. But if you hear me say something like da or like pa naravno bre or tako je, like that just means that I'm cozy and all's going well, or good. I've just lost myself. So don't take offense. I think I had something last night that I did where I think the host was confused, and I'm like, oh, oops.
You almost want to sometimes have like do you ever see the really aggressive sign language people that are
Right.
That almost it's almost like an art form. Like they almost like make into a dance or something, and they get really into it and stuff along those lines.
Right, angrily signing. Yeah.
Exactly. Depending on the content, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's see. Serbia, how did I end up here? I'm really into brutalist architecture, and New Belgrade has some of the best examples of that. Just these gray, bleak, like utilitarian concrete buildings for as far as the eye can see. And I figured, that's right up my alley, and I should move to this place and, feel totally comfortable and in my element.
So it's the architecture.
I'm kidding. No, my wife is from Belgrade.
Gotcha.
It's the boring answer.
I was going to say that's the much more understandable answer. But I mean, it is an interesting place, and one that's almost at least among Western culture, like not thought of as like a musical hotspot. But I was thinking about it, and there are a lot of, maybe just because I'm an uber music nerd, like there's a lot of music that comes out of there that's kind of has a unique element that is almost getting lost these days, as everything is sort of mishmashed into wherever it comes from. It kind of all sounds the same. And, I mean, even in terms of like noise rock or like whatever, like, whatever is coming out of it, it has its own vibe, even if it's not immediately able to pinpoint. I mean, is that something that you found with musicians and with music and the obviously being a dude from this side of the pond?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I hadn't really, done much research or heard much about anything, concerning Serbian music, but there was a great movement in, I believe, like the 70s, 80s, with a lot of stuff like, kind of experimental noise and like Akava, a handful of bands. But now it's interesting. There's kind of like there is a scene, and there are a lot of great bands, but it's kind of dominated here by this kind of music called Narodnjaci, which is like folk, and there's an additional version of that called turbo folk, which is some kind of like techno version of this folk music.
That's what happens when you hit the turbo boost on a kit, is you get the turbo folk. Huh?
Right, with Casio keyboards with that like modulator. Right. So it's like banding, as if it were a Ibanez with a whammy bar. It's like that. It's really, really crazy. But there are some great bands here. Like I'm trying to think of Obrni Program, Pressing, who are current. My friend Uroš, who incidentally recorded the Red Step album and his Blackheart Processions live sound guy.
Okay.
He has kind of a surf thing called Threesome, and they actually have I believe in their label is in Washington. So, but they're great. They're like it's instrumental and surfy and cool, and I think they did something that is unique and kind of translates well outside. Serbia is a bit like insular, and I think partially due to its location and economy. I know a lot of bands don't end up here. We never did.
Yeah, it's like just far enough outside the circuit, if you will, that it's kind of difficult for them to get the same sort of touring acts and whatnot, almost in the same way that I guess at a much more smaller scale as some of the cities that are just isolated enough that they sort of have no choice but to create their own scene because there's nothing coming to them, or if they do, it's
sure.
Like
I don't know. For instance, like southern tip of Florida, like not exactly easy to access.
Right.
And
exactly.
Is it worth your time? They're kind of out of the loop, in terms of like alternative stuff. And yeah, it's sort of similar here. And you would have to, make a concerted effort to get here. I mean, I know a lot of people who have gone to Zagreb, which is in Croatia.
Yeah.
But you kind of fit it in to the circuit a little easier.
Right. Well, and I guess it's interesting. I didn't realize, according to Wikipedia, turbo folk served as the dominant paradigm of Slobodan Milosevic, the nationalist regime.
Right.
Wow. The darker side of turbo folk. Okay.
Yes.
So what you're talking about is you have a musical culture that largely has been left to its own devices and has to rely upon its own creativity to flourish and to grow.
Right. And it's either regional, local or regional, part of whatever ex-Yugoslavia. There are some artists who are left over from that time. For example, Zdravko Čolić, known as Chola. He's kind of a singer. He's been around since the 60s. And no matter where he plays in this region, it's like apeshit crazy crowds. So there's still some of this regional stuff left over. As well, and a handful of bands that are left. A band, for example, called Party Breakers here. They've been around long enough to have developed fan base throughout all of ex-EU Balkans. And I don't know if you've heard the band Goblini.
No, I'm not familiar.
Hey, we actually have a funny tour story about them. And I believe they're from here. Or were they from Slovenia? I forget. Anyway, they're from the region, and they also maintain this kind of regional popularity.
So when you're putting together the Red Step stuff, did you have the idea that you were going to be making a new band? Was it just like let's get something together and just see what happens? Like what was the intent behind putting it all together?
Interestingly enough, like really none. I kind of moved here, and I met these guys who, one of whom happened to be my wife's brother-in-law, and he played drums. And the guy who is now my kum, which is in Serbian, it's kind of hard to translate.
Kind of like a godfather or sort of figure, like it's
exactly.
Yeah,
godfather and best man sort of combination thing. So godfather to the kids, best man at your wedding. Oh. And this guy Boris, who plays keyboards, and they were in a band called Kazna Zaushi, kind of like a garagey kind of post-punky thing. They were kind of popular in the 90s, and I happened to see them play, and I was like, these guys are great musicians. And we ended up meeting, of course, due to family stuff, and they're like, we should go all jam, let's go jam together. Right. And not being a big jammer, I was like, well, let's go. Kind of like, I'm really not. So like, we, kind of got together. I had a few ideas left over from, I had just been in San Diego for like four months, and with the intention there of maybe starting something with some people there. So I had some ideas, and we got together and just kind of started playing, and we just sort of kept practicing. I kept bringing, ideas like chord changes and primary melodies and stuff, and we just kept working on it. And so pretty organically, it just kind of, there was no, like, let's get together and do this thing and for any purpose.
Other than just to play. Did you have an idea that you wanted to, and the reason why I'm specifically asking about direction stuff is because it's a little, it's pretty lively band, like a little more frantic and incisive in that way, which was a kind of, getting away from the, the very lovely, but I'm sure sometimes boxed in Black Heart Procession.
Exactly.
Around you.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Doing Blackheart for as long as we've been doing it, it's really taxing to kind of draw upon those sort of emotions and express them. Yeah. It can be draining. It can be cathartic, and that's great. But to put yourself in a position where, time for a new record. Let's my life is fine. Everything is great. I'm well adjusted. Now let me make myself fucking depressed so that I can accurately represent these feelings of morosity and depression.
Let's excavate some misery so we can write some songs here.
Exactly. So I kind of had the intent before, the idea ahead of time anyway, to do something that was a little more aggressive, still dealing with darker subject matter, darker, musically in terms of chord changes, melody, harmony, but just, take it up a notch, be a little more pissed and, less whiny.
Yeah. And I'm trying, and unfortunately I don't have the lyrics handy, and I just haven't listened to it enough to be able to tell you which one, but there's the song with the poison and
Right.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was like, oh, that's an interesting turn of phrase, because it's sort of like if you were to turn some of that around, like add some somber piano, slow it down to tempo, it's like that wouldn't necessarily be out of place as a Blackheart song, but it's like, no, it's presented in this more this more energetic environment, and I mean, it rocks, right? Like Blackheart Procession is a lot of things, but I would say rocks would be a bit of a pull for the most part.
Sure. Yeah, most of the time. From time to time.
Every once in a while, yeah, exactly.
Bring the rock. It's we're capable,
yeah, everybody is capable of rocking, but the choice is the ethos is not it's not Kiss,
Exactly. Yeah, and interestingly, those that song is called "For the Dead."
Thank you. And I didn't have them labeled, so so here I am, just like the one with the thing that does the stuff, yeah.
Well, yeah. Luckily, there's like one song that has poison in the lyrics. So I was pretty easily able to suss that out.
That's why you're a
Yeah,
professional.
so that's interesting. That's interesting because, like, what that song is about to me, could have sort of been taken in either direction. It's like, and I don't know, lyrics for me. I unless you're being super direct on purpose, I really like lyrics to be indirect and interpretable, so that everyone who listens can kind of make it their own thing, or like identify with it in their own specific way through whatever their experiences are. But so whatever, if someone listens to it after what I just said, like it should mean to you what it means. But for me, it meant it was dealing with people who are these like soul-stealing life crushers, who like just make it impossible for you to get ahead or succeed or to even thrive, and how those people come to be who they are, and could you yourself become that, and what would the process be there? Right.
So that's the thing that I found interesting about that song, because I think it's very easy to identify. I mean, there's pop stars have songs about haters. It's like that part's easy, but like the idea of like kind of turning that focus towards this postulating this what if and looking at motivation, I thought that was interesting, and I'm a fan of that kind of lyricism and that kind of exploration, and also it happening in that kind of music, because I feel like unfortunately a lot of folks feel like unless it's presented with certain musical trappings, that nothing of import is being said, and I think that's malarkey, frankly.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think it's important to, people can make, they can enjoy and not enjoy whatever they want. But for me, I like things that challenge me to question things. Why is this how it is? Why do I feel how I do? Why do other people maybe feel how they do? And so I kept the whole narrative there, or like I kept the perspective from one person. So it never really shifted from, I'm talking about you,
right?
You're talking, So I kept it all in kind of first person to have this connection between the antagonist and protagonist, whatever.
Instead of being like, hey Jeff, why are you such a jerk?
Yeah.
I don't even know who Jeff is in this case, but
Yeah. Oh, Jeff talking about himself.
Right. Exactly.
Oh God, that's one of my favorite things ever, when people like refer to themselves in the third person. Toby is super happy right now.
Right. That's I'm trying to think of talking that baseball player that always referred to himself in third person, Ricky Henderson, when he would he would just always refer to him. Ricky Henderson does blah 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 blah. It's like, that's you, dude.
Right. No, super straight. I don't know why. I mean, everyone has these certain things that are kind of strange and foreign to them, and that's one of them for me. Like,
well, how much are you into the idea of? Because again, it would have been. You're at the point in your musical career that you could have just put this out in your own name. Did you feel very much the identity of it as a band, and sort of sublimating that identity for the purposes of this band was important to the presentation?
Well, I think that no matter who has like certain amount of creative control or authorship or presentation of ideas, I think that everyone always matters, and what they bring, even if it's in a certain part or what their experiences have been, what they bring to the table is totally important. And I wanted it I wanted it to be a band. I like the idea of the collective in whatever capacity. And yeah.
Well, another reason I ask is it kind of feels like in this time that we're in, and it's not like the Red Step is like brand new, but it's pretty new, and even just agreeing on a band name is,
Ooh, it's fun.
Jeez.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Well, actually, the band was like we started working on stuff like over 4 years ago, and so something that's important, I think, is that the 2 songs that have been released up to now, this one, Black Summer.
That's the one that just came out in October, right?
Yes, that was the first single through Pravda Records. That was written just like before Trump was elected. And so like it was a really strange coincidence. And I don't know, I'm not usually like a lyric writer. Like with Blackheart, Paul is the lyric writer, and I'll do something like help after, when we agree that everything's okay. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with it. But that song just like flew out like lyrically. And I was always curious, like, why did I choose summer? And like, it doesn't really make sense in this context. But yeah, like I see that it was kind of this weird prediction and unfortunate, horrible thing that unfortunately came true in some ways. And then for Reset, same thing. That was written 3.5 years ago after Trump was elected. And that one was not so much like political, but just like observations of social behavior that were kind of disturbing and disappointing to me, like just watching people step all over each other getting onto the bus, and just how, I don't know, we can sometimes lose ourselves in the mass, and it becomes difficult to see. But so yeah, again, all of those lyrics, even though they have this like unfortunate coincidence, they were written a while ago.
And you weren't necessarily like writing the theme. It's just that's what came forward at that time, and it happened to correspond.
Yeah, exactly.
So the the band, as you mentioned, you've got a lot of great players. You're mostly known for playing piano, but you're a pretty ripper guitar player. Which one did you start with first?
Can we go back to the name before I forget?
Oh yeah, please, by all means. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is cool. Like, so I think that names are weird because I don't know. I think that like having a not shitty name is better than having an awesome name. Or like it's more about like let's choose something that doesn't suck.
First do no harm. Is that what you're kind of getting?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. I don't know about you, but like I've had this experience of like that's an awesome name, and then you think about it for a few days, and you're like, oh shit, it has that connotation. Like, oops.
And hopefully you think of that before you name your band that.
Yes, officially, right? So I was talking to my cum Rudy, the bassist, and he was mentioning how his son had just started to drive. He had finished, passed the test, which is actually fairly brutal here. It's like really difficult. And he had passed, and he took his first drive on his own, and he was trying to translate a Serbian saying, which is kind of like just, like go for it, jump in the fire, like, like time to do it. And he translated it incorrectly as like taking a red step. And I was like, whoa.
That's cool. What does that mean? It sounds mysterious and cool. Yeah.
Yes, and it had like all kinds of weird like connections. So I thought like, okay, with Blackheart Procession, it's sort of it's a color and a movement. And first of all, I was like, wow, that's interesting. And it's very simple. It wasn't taken. So that was part of the...
Yeah, I guess that's probably the most key thing of all, is that somebody else doesn't already have it. But then, it's good.
The other things I thought about were like, in trying to do this like analysis, like, will this have anything, will it turn out bad in some way? The moving to Serbia, which was, under Tito, like kind of communism.
Sure. I didn't even think about that aspect of it. That's fine.
Right. And well, I mean, yeah, having lived here, there's still, I mean, it's changed quite a bit since, in the last 5 years, but there are still plenty of socialist leftovers. And a lot of institutions still in place. So it feels, quite a bit different. So there's that aspect, like this red step moving from, the States to here. Then kind of like a dance move, like they would, the step.
Oh yeah, sure. Like like remember when there were so many songs that were named after dance crazes, real or imagined? I mean, it seems like that was almost a lost art now.
Exactly. So something like that, and then also it's kind of noirish a little bit, like some like footprint stepping in the blood and making bloody footprints. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because you could almost envision like a Wim Wenders movie with that name, or like something Jim Jarmusch or something, right? Something
right.
Where you've got just like people looking really dour and like something ominous happening and something along those lines. So it's evocative image-wise.
Yeah, and at least it didn't suck, and it had these little connections that I thought personally and as a sort of continuation. Oh, not post Black Art, but as the next, my first project kind of post Black Art. Why do I keep saying post Black Art? It still exists.
But I know what you're saying, right? Since since Black Art is being an active concern. I mean, as much as any band can be an active concern in this day and age, right. But I know what you're saying. But again, I guess we got to be careful with the language here, because it is a band that means a lot to a lot of people, and people might freak out.
Right. Anyway, there was a name thing before I managed to forget it. And of course, all credit to Rudy, our bassist, and Mike Hume.
Yeah, that's a hell of a... Well, that's great, too, because then you actually have a good story. Because one of the reasons I actually really asked how'd you come up with the band name? Because to me, that's like a 7th grade fanzine level question, unless there's a great story behind it. So that's actually a really good story.
Oh, fantastic. My favorite question ever was, what's your favorite pizza topping?
Sometimes those can be genius, though. Like there's a...
Yeah.
There's a show, I don't even know what it's called, and I've referenced it in the show before, so you think I would be able to remember it, but it's literally just like little kids interviewing bands, and it's the best. Like, it's even when it's like not great, it's still the best. But every once in a while, I'll be like, man, that's a good question. Well, I never thought of that, and that's from the mouths of babes, as they say, right?
Right. How it's framed, what the context is, sure. Like, yeah exactly. Like, any of these can be good. Or genius, perhaps.
So the whole band isn't Belgrade specific, right? I mean, you have isn't Sarah Jane from London?
Yeah, I met her. She moved here briefly to Belgrade, and that's how we met. So she was here through a large portion of things, and for the recording, and has since moved. I think she lives in Spain now.
Because I was going to ask with Brexit and everything, and just moving around between countries and whatnot, I was kind of curious about that aspect of things. But...
Yeah, everyone else is here. So if we end up, I mean, of course, touring at this point is kind of a, I don't know, like nebulous thing to discuss, but hopefully soon. But if and when that happens, I'm sure we'll figure something out. And it's Europe, and so it's like being in the States. I suppose.
Right, exactly, yeah. So then, because I did the thing where I asked a question and actually didn't follow up, and you did, which I appreciate, but I also wanted to bring up the fact that, a lot of folks know you from playing piano, from playing keyboard, but you're ripping a guitar on this. And so which one of those did you start with first?
I started with guitar back when I was, 14-ish. Let's see. Yeah, I was very sort of ambivalent toward music for a long time. Well, the first things that I listened to were like on 8-track tape with headphones when I was 5, like a bunch of Pink Floyd, The Wall, and Side of the Moon, and some Yes stuff. So I think that all of those things kind of just embedded themselves in some way. But up until I heard Master of Puppets actually on vinyl.
Nice.
It was mind fucking blown.
Yeah, that's a great guitar record. Yeah, sure.
This can happen, and just the sort of like implied symphonic stuff with all the the guitar minis and everything, and the arrangements. I was like, this is possible. That's crazy. So then I decided, okay, of course I want to play guitar. So it kind of started with guitar, and I got really into thrash stuff, Testament, Slayer, Corner, at the time. Of course, along with Metallica, Megadeth, all that stuff, and started playing guitar and started kind of practicing the technique and stuff, and ended up kind of doing metal. So guitar was the first. Thrash metal guitar was like my first love musically.
Well, and the reason why I'm glad you mentioned that, because the reason why I ask is that I found that a lot of folks that are either multi-instrumentalists that gravitate towards, or are most well known for keyboard, or have that background, that there seems to be a deep appreciative love of a certain type of metal. And
really? That's interesting.
Yeah, and I wonder if that has to do with like the scale, like the fact that the piano was like a different scale, and it hits in different. I wonder if there's some. I'm not smart enough in music theory to exactly articulate it, but definitely the near symphonic elements of some of the things you're talking about, which are things that I've certainly, as somebody that is not is a barely functional keyboardist, would definitely be able to appreciate that. I wonder if that's like a correlating factor or what, or has to do with how the brain is wired. That's more of a statement or observation rather than a question. But
I'll comment. Let's see. For me, perhaps, and very likely, I'm sure. For me, keyboard. I'll continue the guitar story a bit, so this makes a little more sense. So, after being pretty much into thrash metal and this technique and guitar pyrotechnics and stuff, I started my school at the time. My high school was one of the few left that actually had music curriculum. And it was a very good one, a jazz program. So I wanted to start. I met some people who, at school who were playing music, like my age, a little bit older, and I wanted to get involved in this, jazz thing. So in order to get to be involved with that, you had to take theory and lessons with your instrument.
Gotcha. Okay. So you have to get that foundation in, because. Yeah, it's not. It's when you're in a situation like that, it's not like, hey, get in a room and let's see what happens. It's no, there's a articulated plan, and here's the thing that we're doing, and here's how we're gonna get there.
Exactly. So I had always considered, jazz to be the sort of next part of the evolution in terms of complexity and sophistication, and both in terms of technique and theory and everything. But what ended up happening is after that, like a year after I graduated high school, a couple years actually, I realized that every time I sat down with the guitar, my fingers would just like do the talking. Like there was no correlation between what I was feeling or thinking or an idea. It just, my fingers were like getting in the way. Like there was this like short circuit between like my heart and mind and the actual instrument itself. So I made this decision, like I'm going to put the guitar down for a while and approach something that is completely foreign, and really like trying not to have that happen with that instrument, and so that there's just a clearer connection between like if you're hearing an idea in your head, it's if you're unfamiliar with an instrument, it's easier to figure that out, or just like the mystery and the newness of the thing, like that pattern that looks like that, sounds like that on piano.
Find something interesting in the searching of trying to
do. And so to this day, I'm not a comfortable piano player. I learn the things that I write, but I couldn't just sit down and improvise like I could perhaps with guitar, but I would have to bone up on that stuff. But yeah, absolutely not piano. It's kind of all primarily by ear, and it's usually still uncomfortable. And I've of course developed patterns over time, but I really try to like avoid doing that, so that there's a clear path.
Yeah, and it occurs to me too that because I saw Black Heart Procession many a time under Your Own Power, and then also with other like-minded bands that wouldn't necessarily be like sounding bands, and some of them had pretty unique and idiosyncratic guitar players that would be doing their own thing, and there's the keyboard, piano, whatever, however you want to phrase it. It's an expressive instrument, but like you don't It's very difficult to like, unless you've got like a guitar or something, it's very difficult to be like super active with it and move around and feel the music in that way. So I guess I'd be curious as to your thoughts as to, I'm being on guitar in this band and having that freedom of movement, but then also, did anybody kind of like light your imagination up when you would be seeing these other acts you're touring with playing guitar and be like, oh, I kind of want to do that?
Yeah, I'm absolutely like inspired by people's creativity. And I don't know, let's see, like Chris Brokaw, one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people. There's a lot. I also get bad at names and everything, but and I'm also not a very active listener. Like when we were touring a whole lot, I'm more of like I'm less of a consumer than a purveyor, and I mean I'm more of a purveyor than a consumer. But when I was on tour, I was like just due to the fact of being on tour, like you're exposed to a lot, and so I was kind of more aware of what was going on at the time. But to answer your question, yeah, I think it's more general for me than just guitar, but like an idea or a feeling of something more up tempo, and I think it was kind of a mood shift. And again, like I mentioned before, this thing with Blackheart, it's like it can be draining to be so
right.
Morose and depressed and whatever. So just something that's a little more like, let's kick the olds, let's it doesn't have to be thrash, but like let's do something that's a little more up tempo.
Yeah, and it's something where, again, it's the red step, right? You're making a movement in that same way towards something that's a little different.
Totally. How are you with in terms of have you had experience with different instruments and how they sort of evolve from one to the other?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Well, I started on the guitar, and it's still the thing that I kind of do the best. I think I know just enough to be dangerous on keyboard. And like
I said,
and I learned modicum amount of drumming, mostly to kind of improve songwriting, and just because it's fun to play the drums. It's a good catharsis to hit things.
Totally.
But I mean, ultimately, I think, I use the term evolved caveman of my own guitar playing, which is one of the reasons why I've taken one guitar lesson in my entire life, and it was like my COVID treat to myself. It was with Dwayne Dennison. And,
great.
And like 98% of what he did was like 10,000 feet over my head. So I was like, oh my God. Which, I mean, he's one of my favorite guitar players of all time. But I was like, you know what?
Likewise, also incredible player. Yeah, he's great.
I was like, I'm just gonna do this because like I'm gonna know that I'm gonna be on my element. I'm gonna I'm just gonna do this and see if it does something good for me. But it was cool because for me, I was in a songwriting rut. I felt like, hey, I can grind out these kinds of songs forever and ever, and people, it connects with who it connects with, and people seem to like it. But that's not enough for me. I need it to go further. I need it to go different places, and I need to find some way to accomplish that. So, and it worked. I mean, I picked up a few, again, like I said, me sitting here dragging my knuckles, kind of looking to the side, and all the 15th level fighter mage guitar wizardry Dennison was trying to show me. And but I picked up enough things that like I was like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about it that way. And how do we make this about me? But anyway, so I guess that's where
I don't know. I'm sorry if that's
no. That's I'll talk about it, but like this is usually when I get angry messages. Why you could have talked about 3 Mile Pilot, and you talked about your guitar lesson with Dwayne Dennison. Like what?
All right.
They're not that angry, but
yeah. Talking about
well, that's why I was asking if anybody kind of sparked your imagination. Just because if you see someone very good at their instrument or that does something really cool, sometimes you're like, oh man, I wish that would be cool if I could do that sometimes. Like a perfect example would be like Warren Ellis, right? I never thought about the violin at all, other than like, yep, that's an instrument, all right. And then once I heard the Dirty Three and saw them, I was like, wow, I wish I could do that. That's awesome. And then, which is so funny because he's such a he's a player that plays the way he plays. Like, I know people that are classically trained that, like, everything he does is wrong, but it's great.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And that's the thing, like, okay, technique, theory, these are all great things, but sometimes they, trip you up. And I agree totally with what you're saying. Sometimes it's nice to see something else and, allow yourself to get yourself outside the bubble that you're in. For sure.
And of course, as you mentioned, there's no touring right now, but I mean, the freedom of movement of not being stuck behind a keyboard too is that's going to make you think about music sometimes in a different way.
Right. And actually I've been teaching guitar through the COVID times online, and doing that has been really fun. And though I look at it a little bit differently, so I'll have students who are like, I want to learn A, B, C, or D song. And so it's really fun to go, to grab the guitar and use it like in that context where it's like not necessarily what I would be doing like for myself, but it's just I'm having fun with it now. Like I've been watching like, different, I was always a little bit like confused about how like country solos work versus blues.
Sure.
solos.
Yeah.
So
like for instance, Elliot
at-
Easton from the Cars is a total like country solo style player, even though like the Cars are not a country band in any way, shape, or form. I always found that fascinating. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So then that was really fun. I discovered something where it's like, ooh, that sound comes from this combination of the major and minor pentatonic of the same note.
Right.
So you play A major pentatonic, A minor pentatonic, you kind of combine them together, and that makes that sound. And I was like, oh man, you can even use the passing tones. So like the flat 5 of the blues scale,
right,
would be in a certain place. You can even use that as a passing tone and use them all. You just sort of turn them into one big scale and use your ear, and it's great. So that was really fun. So absolutely, in terms of like discovery and new things, I have been having a lot of fun with guitar lately, and in those terms. I actually just bought a really cool. Actually, my wife bought it for me. I tried to dissuade her, but she refused, and I thank her for that. It's a Vox SDC 33, so single double cutaway.
Oh, cool.
Solid body double cutaway. It's weird. They made them I think they made them for a couple years, 10-ish years ago. And it's strange. It looks like some combination of an SG, so it's got the two horns, but it's pretty thin, and it's got these like kind of P90s, but you can split the coils. It's really a weird guitar, and I'm loving it.
Well, so you said it was a Vox. What was it? It was a Vox.
Vox XDC solid double cutaway. So SDC 33.
33. Okay, that's. I think I know the ones. I know the ones you're talking about. They're kind of. It's like a sharp sort of horn.
Yeah.
Kind of like
and they make
double
like
horns almost, but like not quite.
Yeah. Which is what I love about it. It's like, it's pushing the line of like you could be like it's almost metal, but it's just not.
Right. It's just on the one side of it. Yeah.
Yes, I love pushing those boundaries. It's like not quite. Like you haven't officially arrived in metal land, but and of course then the headstock is very classic looking, so that sort of detracts from it. But and so that was a really fun thing to kind of like I kind of became a guitar nerd again, and that was really fun.
Are you becoming an expert on like coil tapping and pickups and all that stuff along those lines?
Well, not so much. And actually, I haven't plugged this thing into a serious I use with Red Step and AC30. So I haven't been able to like actually plug this thing into it and experiment with tone. But more, again, with this guitar nerding out stuff. But anyways, it's coming, and I'm looking forward to it.
Do you use any pedals or anything, or are you just mostly going straight into the amp?
Not a single pedal. I'm one of those complete purists. I'm like guitar, amp, that's it.
Ian MacKaye, Malcolm Young. There's a rich tradition. Oh yeah, straight into the amp.
Okay.
There's a rich tradition of it. Don't get me wrong, and it's a deep rabbit hole with effects pedals that.
That's the thing. That's exactly nailed it. That's it. It's like I would rather what I've got is what I want to use, kind of idea in the first place. And whatever instrument, you can make something out of it and do your thing. It's fun. It's again fun to experiment with that stuff. And the rabbit hole, yeah, it can get crazy. So for me, it's like, okay, I would rather my sound not be dependent on 15 pedals that if one goes out, I'm screwed. So at least it's like I can switch amps, or I can use a different guitar, or it'll generally be the same thing. It won't I won't lose.
Yeah, I mean, without turning this into a guitar roll discussion or anything, a cranked AC30 is about as good as it gets for rock music, if you ask me. I mean, that's just like it's amazing.
It's genius, and on the record, we actually had to try to figure out how to get a tone that was similar to that in the studio, and we ended up used like a Mesa Boogie, like Studio 22. And I can't remember the cabinet, but then also another like a Fender, some kind of Fender twin on one side, and so they're kind of like panned out a little bit from each other, and it gave that sort of same like tonal quality of the AC30, but it just sounded better, in that recording sophistication way.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering, would you mind talking a little bit about some stuff with Blonde Redhead? Because I remember was a melody that you did some stuff on, Melody of Certain Damaged Lemons?
Right. Yes.
That's like, for me, that's like one of the of the epochs of Blonde Redhead. That's one of the sort of that's their Kid A or whatever. I don't know how you would characterize it.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know what you call that without it being cheesy. Yes, no, yeah. I know, but I know it.
And yes, I did used to work at a record store, so.
Me too. I if you want to call Tower Records a record store, I don't think we had.
Well, that's the same records. I worked at Tower Records too. Are you kidding me? That's that's awesome. I worked at Tower Records in Berkeley, which is like the of all the records. So it was like the 5th coolest record store out of 5 in Berkeley.
Well, all right. Well, at least it made the list.
Yeah, so, exactly. It was an honor to be nominated.
Yeah, actually, I mean, if I remember, I have some interesting Tower stories. It helped kind of develop the things that inspired me. It's how I got into classical music.
Yeah, same. It's how I discovered there's great jazz. Oh, there's great classic country. There's basically something awesome in all of these genres.
Totally, and yeah, I discovered Eastern European, Soviet, Russian classical stuff. That was stuff that I was like, what? I hadn't heard it before, but in my head I was like, there must be this thing that's this stuff, and I just hadn't heard it. And so I was able to I was a supervisor, so I would just sit in the back and during the I was a night supervisor there, so I would sit in the back and unwrap all these CDs and then re-shrink wrap them and just listen to stuff. And so I discovered my favorite composer, Alfred Schnittke, through that, and Martinu, Czech composer. Anyway.
It doesn't pay that well, but you get a lot of payout in terms of musical experience and finding cool new stuff when you work at a record store.
Yeah, it was invaluable. I'm really happy that I had that chance to explore the freedom of exploration, especially back then when there was no YouTube and download.
Mario Rubalcaba and I went on for it feels like hours about this when he was on, which is very funny because I'm sure I hope it was enjoyable for other folks because it sure as hell was enjoyable for us.
That's great. Love Mario, of course.
Yeah, he's the best.
Yeah, totally. The blonde redhead.
Yeah,
thing.
blonde
so,
redhead. Yeah. Oh yeah, we're not just hanging out. We're trying to get some valuable information here.
Oh, hopefully it's some kind of combo. Anyway, yes. So the blonde redhead. We Blackheart had been. Well, I think we had been on Touch and Go for the previous record. We started working with Touch and Go.
The third one, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. So two was our first record with Touch and Go, and then the third album was when we did the tour with Blonde Redhead. So we did a tour, I think. On that record with them, and we ended up in Seattle at Bear Creek Studios, where we had recorded our first 3 records, and where they ended up recording, I think their next, they recorded this melody, and I think the next 2 maybe. Let's see. So yeah. At any rate, we introduced them. They met everybody. They liked it. They loved the studio. And then they asked me if I would come play piano on a handful of songs on the record. And are you there?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm just listening. Yeah. I've done enough talking. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. No, I was just making sure there was not some connection.
No,
anyway,
I do the same thing. I'm like, hello?
I know, who knows with those crazy broadband issues these days. So, they asked me to play on a handful of songs. They sent me a cassette tape with like some guitar chords and like kind of a vocal melody type of deal. And so I wrote piano parts for like those 5-ish songs. And funny story. The day before, I went to fly up to Bear Creek, which is I don't know if I mentioned it. It's in Bothell near Seattle. Mm-hmm. And so I was teaching my girlfriend at the time how to ollie on a skateboard. So awesome. for anyone who knows the mechanics of an ollie, it's like your front foot bends and slides up, and once you click the tail, and it's supposed to stabilize in the air. So I was showing her in slow motion, and horrible idea, and I came down with my ankle in that position, and it just went pop, and this is my sustain pedal foot. So there is one pedal that I'm dependent on, and that is the piano sustain pedal.
The one thing you need your feet for.
Yeah. So scratch what I said earlier. There is one pedal that I'm massively. Maybe that's the thing. I'm already dependent on one, like completely.
Yeah.
So
you don't want anything to do with it on the other. I'm playing guitar.
I bring 2 sustain pedals on tour, in case one happens to break.
That's smart.
Because it's kind of my piano playing style depends on this hiccuping of the sustain pedal. At any rate, so my entire foot was blue and purple except for one little patch of my big toe. The whole thing, just horrible. It was awful. So and it was again my sustain pedal foot. So I flew. I remember on the plane I didn't have a shoe on that foot, and I went up there, recorded. So if it sounds painful, not just emotionally, it was physically painful.
It was.
But there was a literal pain in that recording. So.
It wasn't just emotional pain.
Right. That's it. Yeah. So that's how that happened.
Did you have an idea at the time that that it was gonna connect with folks the way it did? Like, was it immediately apparent that this was like something that was epochal, if you will?
You mean the actual song itself, or the album?
Yeah. When the record was coming together, like when you're hearing the tracks in their non-demo form, and you're playing to them and stuff, did it make sense?
Well, I was surprised at the direction they went. Yeah. Like in a good way.
Right, because it wasn't noisy really at all.
Different.
But it was,
Yeah, and it's structured differently, focused on different elements, more melodic, harmonic, just different than before. So, but it was cool. I mean, again, part of their evolution. And the next record was I think the next one was kind of, it made a little movement, but I think the one after that, like, I forget the name, but it sounds kind of like slow divey and stuff. They kind of made it.
Yeah, I forget the name too, but that's fine. We all know. Everyone's got the internet. They can figure it out, or just let us email me about it, and like it'll be like 5 months from now, I'll be like, what? And I'm like,
right,
which is more likely.
One of hundreds of podcasts in that one moment, right?
Yeah, because everyone listens to it in their own time usually, and then it's like I get them. Like oftentimes I'll just get like a random comment like, I'm sorry, I don't remember, what is this about? And then they'll remind me, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that, but.
Yeah, but even more strange about a couple of those songs I ended up on, this one of them, which is For the Damage.
Yeah.
Like crazy. So someone actually told me, because weirdly with that record, like I have like a couple aliases, and I didn't really get stuck on Tobias Nathaniel like as my like sort of official music pseudonym for a while, and I gave them my real name, and so I was credited with my real name,
right,
with Toby.
Yeah.
So it was weird in terms of credit, so it's like credited differently, But anyway, so I don't know much about. I hadn't heard from them, and we haven't spoken in a while. But someone told me like that Blonde Redhead song that you're on, like, is like crazy viral. It's part of that Rick and Morty thing.
Yeah.
And it's the evil Morty theme.
It's such an iconic. It's used well in the show also, but it's something where, I didn't watch that show at all until I think like last year because I assumed it was something I wouldn't like, which I was wrong. It's the fan base I don't like. But
exactly.
when I heard it, it like made me jump up from my seat. I was like, hold on a second, I know that.
Right. So did I. I was like, "Whoa, hey!"
Right.
Like I know what that is. But no, the funniest thing is that when I searched it, people are like, "Evil Morty theme, this and that." So I actually searched "Evil Morty theme," and what came up first was a shit ton of like piano tutorials. Like, millions of views.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, piano tutorials, not to mention there's like hundreds of millions of views of that thing and its different manifestations. But I found that quite amusing. I was like, it's cute, like watching them,
Did they nail
attempt
it?
to play it.
Were they getting it right or no?
I left one comment on the one guy who did a good job. I said like, hey, I wrote this piano part and recorded it on Blonde Redhead's record. Like, you got the groove. He's like, yay. So
wow, that's got to be. I would venture to say I know anything about the mindset of somebody who makes piano tutorials on YouTube, but that's got to be the nadir to a certain degree of
sure.
success.
No, he was happy. He's like, wow, I'm honored. Thanks.
Yeah, because that show is it's very, very popular. I mean,
it's massive. Yeah.
I'm not a big Spotify guy, but I happen to like look at Blonde Redhead on Spotify for some reason. I think because I maintain my own library, but I didn't have whatever it was I was looking for, and I wanted to listen to it. I don't know why I need to front load what I'm about to say with that. Like, it's very important for me. I think it's a record store guy in me, right? Well, I have them all. And I maintain, all of this information that nobody cares about that. But I noticed that it's the code because it's the coda on that one for the damaged coda, and it was like, oh, why is that? Why is that? So many more streams than all the rest of them. And I was like, oh right, it was in that cartoon, and then like that's when it was sort of like, oh, yeah, that cartoon's like one of the biggest things in the world, and like everybody knows what that is, and like all these people that have never heard Blonde Redhead, don't know from that record, like they know that piece of music, which is just wild. It's like a part of like mass culture.
It literally, like here, I teach and have English as well as music, and I have students who, oh, you did music before, are you doing music now? Da da da. And they're like, can you play something?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so I play that, and they're like, it's that.
That's awesome.
Like so Serbian kids, teenagers know that as well. Yeah, I mean it's literally massive.
That's wild, and it's funny that it would be something that's, it's not even from, any. I love that record. I love that song, but you could like slip in any Black Heart Procession song in there too, and that also would have been just as it would have hit like those moods. So it's funny that something that you were a guest on. It wasn't a thing that was like one of yours.
Right.
But
very strange, but so is life.
Yeah, it's nice if anybody listens to anything at all. One thing I did want to mention, I know I don't want to go too deep on the Blackheart Procession dive because I feel like there's other places you've done that plenty. But I saw Blackheart in many manifestations, and that includes like bigger bands as well as like really stripped down. And the thing that occurred to me while watching all of those manifestations is that the songs worked even when it was. I think I saw one was just like you and Paul, like that, where it's just you two, and it still worked.
That's the most stripped down.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to get more stripped down than that, I guess, unless you got like I don't know, a Zoom meeting maybe would be more stripped down. But other than that,
sure.
But then I also saw it with like a bigger band too. Like we had like the more you could bring out the more Baroque elements, and do it that way. So I guess where I'm going with that is how did you approach serving the song in that way when you have more people, which more people, more problems sometimes, not always the case with arrangement. And then also trying to make do with less when it's just like stripped down to its barest essentials.
Yeah, so the first 3 records, it's really easy because, the way that Blackheart started is that Paul and I were, it was like the tail end of 3 Mile Pilot's like relationship with Geffen Records. And so, after having gone through that experience, I won't go into it much, but you can imagine, everyone was like, and we were like,
it's one of those things where it's crazy to even think about that happened at all, but it's most of those stories are the same, so I don't think we need to go into too many details.
Yeah, just my perception of things crushed, and freedom stepped on, whatever, of creativity. So we were like, let's really do something, creative, where we're like, just really able to do what we want without any expectation or authority from a label. And so we ended up making these things together. And so for the first record, it was basically he and I in his, a bedroom in his house, like me on piano and sometimes guitar and sometimes broken xylophone. And we just like made these things that worked fundamentally with the 2 of us doing them that way. And so for the first 3 records, the things kind of worked that way. And we would have, guests like Mario, Rubalcaba played on the first 3 records, Jason Crane, who played with, Rocket from the Crypt, and also with me and some other bands. But we would have friends come up and play, but we were also limited by like the cost of plane tickets to fly people out to Bear Creek. So like, I guess the answer is like, it's sort of a practical answer. Like you can add, it's easy to add to those things when they're sort of crafted that way. And we, had extra parts on the album, organ part here or there, different stuff. So it's easy to remove things from the core, or it's easy to add things to this core thing, and then they can be removed later, like for the show. So I think that's maybe why it worked. However, the 3 records after, we actually like started the studio, or rather Paul did, in San Diego, and we used our advanced instead of recording at Bear Creek to, buy some gear and start kind of taking the reins there. And when we did that, we had access to a lot more resources in terms of like friends and people to actually come in and play. And then it got trickier. Like there are songs, most of the songs from the first 3 records could theoretically be played just like Paul and I.
Yeah.
But then it gets more difficult, and you'd have to cherry pick the ones that are this more classic Blackheart thing.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to do some stuff on the spell or something because there's just too much going on.
Totally, it requires the band. Yeah, like it requires everything there. Or everything there is part of the core,
Yeah. Well, and it occurs to me, too, that I think one of the reasons why some folks really resonate with those first 3 records is because it's like the space in between everything is almost an instrument in and of itself.
Absolutely. That was, yes. Uh-huh. I don't know if it was a deliberate choice, but I've come to think of it the same way, like especially early Blackheart stuff. It's, almost more about what's in between than what's there. It's like a negative.
Do you find that folks' connections to that band, and especially that era, to be, is that a welcoming experience? Has it ever gotten weird or uncool or anything along those lines?
It's been, I don't know, it's been great. I mean, I'm like grateful to, been a part of something that has affected people in a positive, it's usually a positive way. At least what I hear of. I was feeling depressed, and this, really brought me out of it. Like I identified with it. It felt real to me, and I understood that other people can, feel this way and can express it. So yeah, I mean, absolutely for me, very positive. But just like everything, in terms of fans and, whatever, press, expecting you to sort of like have this impossible combination of maintaining your sound and then evolving at the same time.
Right. And so any step at all is going to be misinterpreted, or, oh, that wasn't what I wanted you to do. Well, too bad.
Right. So yeah. So it makes it difficult as a band, and when you're writing things, and when you're, I mean, for me, what's important to me in music, like everything is great, but like the 2 things that matter to me are genuineness and taste. So like if you're not genuine, I think that people can feel it. I mean, there's even some mainstream bands who like I'm like, well, that sucks, but it's like genuine. They mean it.
It sucks in a very genuine fashion.
But they mean, yeah, like you can. I don't know. I think people can tell. They can sniff it out.
Totally.
Like that's and then for me, taste is important. And like if you want to, I'm not big on like the genre definition or whatever, but there's certainly like you probably shouldn't combine A, B, and C. It would be tasteless. So yeah, it's just difficult. It's difficult to try and balance all those things and make everyone happy. And in the end, the point is, I guess, like I'm really happy that people like, that Blackheart stuff and whatever we've done. I'm super appreciative. But in order to do it, it's like we've got to be genuine.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes, how do you maintain that without changing something or becoming contrived and forcing yourself to do something new? If there's nothing like going in a new direction. It's just not.
Yeah, it requires a little bit more of a psychic cost because of you wouldn't want to harm the integrity of the thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a strange dynamic there.
But it's interesting. I mean, I felt like when Amor del Tropico came out, like I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't expect this, but I like it. Like it didn't seem like it was like off base. It didn't seem like there was like a major stylistic shift in the ways that matter. It just was like, oh, they're trying. Oh, this is cool. And honestly, like I these days, I probably, if I throw on Blackheart, I'm probably gonna throw on that or the Spell rather than the first three, because the first three are like, I need to be in a certain mood or this is not gonna hit right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and again, largely with Amore, it's because we were able to record in San Diego and have more people involved in the project and playing in different like upright bass on this or cello on that, where we didn't have that option before. So I think that the genuinity was still there, and we were just happy to have more people involved and make the songs a little bit more dense. And in some cases, there are some that are equally minimal.
yeah, and it seems it wasn't as, I guess what I'm saying is it wasn't as big of a deviation necessarily as some people's howling about it maybe would have led you to believe, where it was like, okay, you just want them to be the Ramones? Like they've made like 3 records of like this like really awesome model and inward looking bar stuff. Like this is, I thought it was great personally, but I also play music, so of course I think that
extra cool. But yeah, and also you mentioned the Spell. The Spell is something to me that's
underrated.
It's like if I people ask me to suggest a Blackheart to them, I'll tell them either 2 or the Spell.
I think that's on point. I think those actually might be the 2 best records for that band that from my personal taste. I mean, I think they're great.
Yeah, the Spell, I don't know, it didn't hit this kind of I don't know, critical acclaim or whatever as the previous ones did, but for me it's really special. Like it's one of the most like I'm most nostalgic about that, like the time of my life in my life when that was happening, when we were recording and writing that one really like evokes, brings these memories back.
That was Joe Plummer played drums on that one, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yep. Joe, and let's see.
Jimmy was on that.
We had Jimmy. Yeah, did some bass and keyboards. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, and then it's also funny how things like hit differently, because I feel like, I mean, Blackheart Procession is used as a reference point now. Heck, I've used it as a reference point for things, like to the point of just being like, people know what that means, and it's like, this is gonna sound weird, but I said Greg Picciotto from Dillinger Escape Plan on, and Dillinger Escape Plan kind of like, I could say someone, oh yeah, they're trying to do a Dillinger Escape Plan kind of thing, and people know exactly what I'm talking about now.
Exactly, yeah.
And I feel like the same thing, like I would see bands whether this is terrible. I'd see bands with like, Baroque instrumentation and maybe like, rocking like the 1920s popper thing, and it's like, oh, I bet we're gonna hear some Blackheart ripoff.
Right. Well, who knows? Yeah, I mean, okay, it happened, and okay.
yeah. Well, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, like, whatever. There's bands that like rip off Aerosmith or the Ramones or whatever. Like but it's something where, when you were coming at it from just, the 3 Mile Pilot experience and just writing those songs together, did it ever occur to you would have that cultural cachet down the line and like, whatever, 22 years later, 23 years later?
Right. No, it was strange, and something related to that is, I mean, the whole thing was a whirlwind. We wrote that first album, recorded it, and had it mastered in like a month and 2 months maximum.
Wow.
And it was like super, super fast. And I just remember finally there was a moment to breathe. And it was when, Paul and I had driven up to Bear Creek actually for that one.
Yeah, yeah.
So long drive from San Diego. But on our long drive back, we were listening to the mastered first album, and we were like, huh, well, that's pretty cool.
Right.
I don't know
in the
if
way that
people
you do when
like
you
it.
hear like a record done and you're like, oh, right on. That's
Well, it was like I think like I wonder if anyone will like it, and I was like, I don't know, but I think we did something pretty cool, like pretty unique. And so I remember that kind of moment, and I guess that sort of fuels my impression of things in that way.
well, and it's fascinating that like it seems like that, however you'd want to characterize what those records are, it seems to have a deep connection with this new generation of music listeners, that that's kind of where they're at as a resting state almost. Not to like be like, oh, well, this generation's depressed, but like there's almost like a deeper affinity now that and I mean that's kind of going back to the spell, that it almost seems like, I don't even remember what the hell was popular around that time, but it seemed like everything was kind of moving in mass culture, was moving towards something else. And not that like black art was ever necessarily in vogue, so to speak.
Right.
But I think one of the nice things about all these tools and immediate availability of everything is, although the meritocracy argument's a logical fallacy, I think there is some truth to it, that, stuff that's awesome and, out of time and, accidentally iconic, however you want to say it, like it's going to be able to connect with folks in a different way, even without all that context attached to it.
Right. I mean, well, whatever happened, and again, none of this was on, there was no like whiteboard with like, let's do this and become some iconic and this or that.
Let's do
this. I almost said a Serbian word. So,
yeah, let's do
like
this so some teenager in 2020 can connect with it. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure that was.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, like I mentioned before, it's like, is it genuine?
Yeah. And
again, I think that's where people connect to it. And is it tasteful and genuine? And like really, like everything else can be built around that. And and for those people, when it's like this depressing stuff, people are always surprised when they meet like Paul and I, and they're like, you guys are just so like well-adjusted, like normal people.
Like you don't show up with like vampire capes and like.
Yeah, like thought we would just be completely depressed, and yeah, like whatever. And the thing is it's the answer to that is like when you connect with and interact with all of these dark emotions and things that are there, and you bring them out and you wrangle with them and you express them, it's cathartic. And so they're not bottled up anymore. So when you have this, when your sponge fills and you can squeeze it out, you're free a little bit. And I think it's important for people to be able to have anything like that to do, especially people who struggle with depression, like to have something they can do to get that out or express it or interact with it in some way. I mean, I'm no, psychologist, but I believe like it can be for many people like a good, a positive.
Well, everything's a little smaller when it's out. And that's, again, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think you hit it on the head with the fact that, the authenticity matters. Like it still is, that's always going to connect with folks, no matter like, 2020, 2040, 1910, like whatever. People are going to notice it, and it makes a difference.
Right, I agree.
Okay, so I want to head back to the Red Step, but I also would be remiss as a huge Love and Rockets fan to not mention the David J. thing.
Yeah.
Could you please speak to that? Because I mean, I think there would be assumption that based on Black Art that you guys would be huge Bauhaus fans. Were you a fan before you did if you got the Cabaret Obscura thing? Like how did that come to pass? How was that experience?
Yeah. Okay. They of course I knew about Bauhaus. I was always, I mean, I like looking at what they do now. I appreciate them in a different way. But back when, I don't know, 25 years ago, whatever, it was like, I was like, but the imagery doesn't match the music. And I had this problem have this problem with like God, like The Cure. No, it's like the first few Cure records are killer, but like when they have this happier stuff, I was always like, how do they? It just doesn't connect. Why? And so anyway, looking back now, I get what Bauhaus did, but I always appreciated them where they were. And so how this worked is, I guess, like for some reason David J had moved to San Diego, and he started going to shows and meeting people, and we ended up meeting, and he asked us if we would do, Paul and I, if we would do something with him, and we said yeah. And so it ended up we recorded this thing at Paul's studio, in his home studio, and yeah, I played piano on it and got to play live with him, and I got to play a Bauhaus song live with him. So I have played a Bauhaus song live with a member of Bauhaus.
Yeah, that's
what's just like I can be done.
That's a good record store flex right there. That's it's pretty good. I think you.
I love that record store flex. Nice.
I think you can get like an award with a bat on it just because of that.
Or a pumpkin. Yeah, something batty.
Yeah, exactly.
I got to see this. This is the funniest thing, is that we were recording this in Claremont, which is like kind of a little small suburb in San Diego, pretty not very urban. And we went to go get lunch, and so
Claremont.
like
yeah, Jesus.
Oh yeah. Okay, so it was like I drove, and David J came with me in the front seat, and we went to Burger King. And as we were like in line in the drive-through, I'm like, I'm in a drive-through at Burger King with David J
in Claremont.
It was pretty absurd.
Where's that reality show?
Yeah. So yeah, I remember chuckling to myself.
So did he know who you guys were? Like how did that come to pass?
I think honestly, I'm not sure if he knew before, but I think just, having moved to San Diego and getting involved with the scene there, going to shows, I think, he became aware.
That's wild. Wow. That's like a Don Caballero song title or something.
Oh boy, those guys. Yeah. Got some fun stories about them.
Yeah, any of you can share, or you want to keep a professional reputation intact?
Let's leave it be for now.
Okay, fine. That sounds good. What do you want folks to know with the Red Step? I mean, it'd be nice if people could just listen to things on the face of it and not come in with expectations of it being a certain thing. Do you feel like, because there's some video presentation for some of it, which it seems like that's, people like videos. Videos have made a big comeback during COVID times, especially. Do you have a specific kind of thing that you want people to latch onto with it, or are you just trying to let the music speak for itself? What do you want people to know, if anything, about the Red Step, other than the fact that it exists and you can buy a copy and listen to it?
Put me on the spot. I don't know. Like, yeah, what to say without sounding totally cliche and cheesy. It's something that happened, and it was a direction, and some strange events landing me in Serbia and meeting some people and playing some music together, and this thing just happened. We want the people to know. I don't know. Yeah. We could talk about the artwork, which my wife does. Mariana.
Yeah, I mean, the artwork's cool. Like it's interesting, and it's something where it's not like it's a break necessarily from what you've done before, but it definitely has its own feel, and I think that's important for a record to have its own feel and its own look.
Yeah, I mean, okay, in connecting with the art too, it's sort of apocalyptic. And the idea was, as an observer of things and, particularly social behavior, it was just generally a disappointment. And I saw things kind of going in a very bad direction. And it, like, at least lyrically, it was kind of a representation of those, a collection of those kind of observations. Like we talked about this For the Dead thing. A little bit about the reset, like why are people treating each other so shitty?
Yeah.
Stepping all over each other. Like, should we change? And I don't know, even if I didn't set out with like an idea of like a hope, like a happy ending or hope. I think that some of the songs have some hope to them. but it's just a snap. I mean, really, it's just a snapshot of, me in some ways, and then everyone in their way, just kind of like how things are and how they're perceived by certain people. Hopefully back to the genuinity thing, like authenticity. Like I hope that that's there, and I hope that people can at least appreciate that. There was no moment of this that came from like anything contrived or trying to be anything. I guess that's why it's so hard for me to answer. It's like,
it's a hard question. It's well, and it's sort of like the idea hopefully is that it speaks for itself, right? And then people can figure it out on their own. That's always the hope.
Right. That would be great.
Did you?
And I hope that it connects. I hope it connects with people, and I hope, like I said before with Blackheart, hearing stories of people, that music helping them through some tough time or helping them understand something about themselves or about their situations. Like as long as I would be like overjoyed if it helped anyone at all. If someone connects with it and it puts them on some, a good path or helps them understand.
Well, sometimes it's just nice to have stuff articulated too. Like we were talking about, sometimes, everything's a little smaller when it's out, right? So, I mean, when we were talking about Black Summer and it just kind of hitting the nail on the head in a very unfortunate manner. Like, I mean, that's
right.
Sometimes words fail, so you have to have other ways to connect and have that expressed. And I think that's something that whether it was by unfortunate prediction, design, or complete accident, just on that alone, it's something where it's like, oh man, yeah, and
right.
it's easier to deal with now for sure, but
yeah, I mean, and like I was a little bit weirded out about releasing these things because of this connection that they have, like this for me especially. I was like, how the hell is this like so accurate?
Yeah.
Like, and did it happen? And I was even worried about like putting it out because I thought it might be perceived in the wrong way. Like but I wanted it to be like the most important thing. Like these songs were not written about now as a reaction to now. They were predictions, and they were just feelings. They were observations turned into output, and that's what they became based on my, lyrically speaking, based on my kind of perception of things.
Well, and that's because that's something I didn't even think about that, because that's something where people experience everything in real time, right? Like we were talking earlier about how there's, kids these days, they're like would connect with like Blackheart 1 and 2 as if it was wrote today. So by that same token, people, if they're hearing Black Summer, they're like, oh, they did a thing about the last 4 years. Okay, cool, we get it. And it was like, oh no, that actually prefaced any of that.
Right.
But then again, context, it's you could be the guy there with the glasses going, actually, whatever, and giving the real time fact check, and fine, okay, that's
sure.
But if the art doesn't work, the art doesn't work, and I think it does, and I think it's, there's power to it, and it's interesting, man. It's cool. Did you talk to me about vocals real quick? We didn't get into that at all, and I'm very curious about that, because the vocals are strong. It fits the music. There's a certain kind of nakedness that happens when you're throwing yourself out there as a vocalist. Like how was that approach? Was that natural for you?
Yeah, this was probably the biggest challenge for me. Actually, without a doubt, the biggest challenge. So I had never perceived myself as a singer, especially a front person like that. I was kind of like in behind the scenes, working the certain other elements. But having moved here to Belgrade, I kind of wanted to do this thing, and I did want a singer, and I did want the lyrics to be in English so that it would be, at least more internationally approachable. So I started asking around, and it was hard to find anyone. And people speak English here, but for that specific thing where you're in front and it's in English. And so this guy Nikola Vrankovic, he's from a band here called Blockout that was fairly, I may have mentioned them earlier, famous in the 90s. So he's a friend of our bass player. He came to one of the practices. He also does production stuff here. And so I was talking with him, and I'm like, man, yeah, I don't know if you know anyone, who could sing in English and do this kind of thing. And he's like, why don't you do it?
Right.
And it was like a slap in the face. And I was like, wait a minute, like, okay, I've thought about this before in terms of instrumentation. Like, I play drums, I play bass and piano, blah, blah, blah. Like, I had just never, like, I don't know, I had some, like, limitation in place, some block that was placed there by me for some arbitrary reason. And I was like, okay. So I did. He's like, do it now. He's like, just start singing, play your song and start singing. And I did. And it was, of course, horrible. And he's like, 6 months. He's like, 6 months. He's like, do this, and in 6 months you'll be fine.
Well, yeah, because you got to start somewhere, right? And if you're not used to doing it, especially not used to doing it with any degree of regularity, you need to make the adjustment. You need to, like, work those muscle groups, get it in. There's literally physicality that needs to happen with it just to get a comfort level with it.
Absolutely, yeah, and then finding your voice. So, like, where, how should my voice sound? What am I capable of? What am I, what would I like it to sound like? What's real for it? And so that, and then as well as, like, lyric writing, I've never really done that before. As I mentioned before, like, Paul writes the stuff, and, like, afterwards we may look at it together and make sure all is good. But
it's different when it's really you're the one on the line with stuff. It. Yeah.
Right. So I will have to thank my wife, because she helped with the original few songs. We kind of co-wrote them, and then, like, the training wheels came off, and I'm like, okay, like, I'm getting the swing of it. But yeah, it was really, really difficult. Probably one of the most difficult things in my entire musical career. But anyway, it's done, and you can do it. It's sort of like, it's so cheesy to believe in yourself, but, like, it won't happen if you don't try, at least, and try hard and for a while, and see if it can be something.
And almost the most important thing is just being comfortable with your own voice too. Like, with the limitations and imperfections as much as anything else. Like, it's easy to, like, I've seen the most well-trained singers in the world, but they have no confidence of any kind. And it's like, okay, well, you're note perfect, but who gives a shit?
Right. Yeah,
not to put your fine point on it, but I mean,
sure, and it matters if you give a shit about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, like, when you mean, again, with this genuine shit, like, when you mean what you're saying, like, it'll connect even if it's not perfect. I'm never out to be perfect. Like, I don't know. I don't think perfect. What is perfection anyway? Like, oxymoron.
Right.
Perfect punk music. Like,
right, exactly. What does that mean? Yeah, but yeah,
right.
and that's where I was going with it. Is that, like, there's folks where it's like, oh yeah, the tonality is perfect, and, like, the pitch is perfect, but it just doesn't matter. It's like a glass house or something. It just doesn't hit the way it should. And again, with the red step, it's different than Blackheart, but there is like a genuine nature from it, which for me, that's anything that kind of quote unquote comes from punk rock in the larger sense of the term, almost always has. Right.
Well, this is illuminating. I mean, you kind of restructured or reframed something for me. But yeah, that genuinity, and especially when it comes from those places, like, super important. Yeah, and in terms of punk and that sort of, need to express, absolutely.
Well, man, this has been great. Thanks so much for doing it. Before I let you go,
thanks so much for having me. But also, yeah, it's super great, and thanks again. And it was awesome.
Last thing is that I always ask. It's the only canned question I ever ask anybody, and you can interpret it however you like. But why do you do what you do?
Because it's necessary. I can elaborate. Like, music for me these days has become not so much like something I would sit down, like the music that I make for these kind of things. Like, it needs to come out, and it's almost not up to me. I don't know if that's cliche or silly, but it's kind of just when the need is there, when something is telling me this needs to be expressed, it needs to be done, then I at least listen to that and do it. And that said, I would also like to, like I mentioned before, with getting back into guitar and kind of nerding out, I would like to also be able to look at music with a little, like less seriousness and kind of enjoy it on a different level and get back to that again.
Beautiful. Tobias Nathaniel, thank you so much, man. This has been a treat.
Thank you so much. It was great. And thanks for having me on again.
Always. Take care, brother.
Take care.
Oh, there he goes. Tobias Nathaniel, the Red Step, Blackheart Procession, etc., etc. We referenced Black Summer about 15 times. Let's listen.
Why can't we
Red Step with The Ghosts of Our Beginning. Before that, we had Black Summer. You can find the Red Step, theredstep.bandcamp.com, and anywhere else you want to get your music. That's fine. Gonna play a couple more tunes. Gonna play the aforementioned. Well, I guess it's now the Evil Morty theme, but the Blonde Redhead song that Tobias plays on that we referenced earlier. And we're going to close out the Blackheart song after that. Here we go.
I know
Blackheart Procession. I was making a special point of Blaine said to have the spell, because we talked about the spell a lot, and I think the spell's an underrated record. And I for whatever reason, just podcaster's instinct, I guess, I picked the most depressing sounding song on that record, which is funny because it's not all. That's the one that's probably their most articulated record because it's not just all depression jams, but it's it's good old doom and gloom. Blackheart style, y'all. I like it. It's good. Still works. Yeah, that's what's key. It's authentic. It's genuine. Before that, we had what I guess is now known as the Evil Morty theme, but that's was Blonde Redhead.
Can you hear me now?
Off of the melody of certain damaged melody of certain damaged lemons records, certain damaged speech patterns. Apparently, good lord. That's the coda for that record. Some folks call it a coda, which is it's not even listed on the record, but it's the last thing on there. It's for the damaged coda. So, anyway, cool. Thanks for hanging in there. This has been Protonic Reversal. I'm your host, Conan Neutron. That was Tobias Nathaniel. What a cool guy. Red Step. Go get it. Pravda Records.
As we come to the close of our broadcast day.
Again, Red Step, Bandcamp.com.
This is my farewell transmission.
Anywhere else you get your records. So the name of the show is Protonic Reversal. This show generally airs
Signing off.
Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central,
Mr.
6
and
Mountain,
Mrs. America,
5
all
Pacific.
Ships at sea.
Podcasted everywhere, anywhere you
Within
get your
the sound of my
podcasts.
voice.
ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. It's
I've
one episode
got
sooner.
50,000 watts of power.
Patreon.com/ProtonicReversal. $1 a month will get you every episode.
Ionize the air.
Almost immediately. About as immediate as it's ever going to get. Other than that, no ads, no sponsors, no kidding. Thanks for everyone sharing the shows around.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
iTunes reviews, all that. It may seem silly, but it helps people discover the show. And
Can you
it's
hear me
appreciated.
now? Out on
Stay
Route
safe out there.
128, you're dark and lonely. I got my radio on.
Take it easy.
Can you hear me now? 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 See the radio. And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner. If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl! It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day,